Okay, this is going to be a TAS of Suikoden, the first game in the Suikoden series that I have made. Completes in about 2.5 hours. Spoilers. I mean, you can see how long the video is. But I thought I'd do a version with some commentary just to sort of explain as we go bits about how the RNG works at various points in the game and how we manipulate it as we go. So a lot of manipulating this game in live runs is based around manipulating the RNG. Especially the first thing we're going to do, which is get the Holy Rune drop. Now, interestingly, this works. This Holy Rune drop, I've done this in the TAS pretty much the exact same way as it's done in a live run, with a little less wandering about. Basically, you have to get a fight with 3 bonbons, which drops, and fight it in a certain way so it drops you a Celadon urn. And then, which you can then sell for 10 grand, which sets you up for playing the Marco Cup game to get lots of money. And then you fight a fight with some mosquitoes, and that gets you the Holy Rune drop. And I tried to find a way of doing it quicker, of getting fights that aren't just the exact same fights that we do in the live run. But I couldn't. Turns out the fights, the 3 bonbon fight and then the 3 mosquito 1 red soldier ant fight that we use in the live run really are the best fights to use for it. So yeah, those are the fights we use. I should say that being able to get these fights for the Celadon Urn drop and the Holy Rune drop depends on which BIOS file your hardware is using. So this is obviously inside an emulator. This is in the emulator BizHawk. And that's where I do my live runs of the game as well. I run this game full 108%. And I'd use BizHawk to do those runs. Most of the other live runs of this game are done using PSTV. And that is important for RNG reasons that I'll explain just in a few minutes. But I do use the PSTV BIOS file inside BizHawk, which means that the game starts from the same RNG value, so I can do the same Holy Rune setup that you can do if you're actually playing on a physical PSTV. You can't do the run exactly the same as you would do on a PSTV, because there are certain points in the game where the RNG value gets overwritten. The first one of those points is when we fly to Magician's Island, and then it's pretty much every the Marco Cup game as well, and then it's pretty much every major war fight. When the game reaches those points, the RNG value gets overwritten with a specific value, and that value is determined by the actual hardware you're using. Now, you may have noticed there that McDowell stood still for a few frames right before he left Gregminster. That was RNG manipulation. So when you're stood in Gregminster, or even as you're walking through it, the RNG is advancing very quickly. The game's making 1 RNG call per frame per NPC that is on screen and randomly moving about. See, we've got a question mark pot there. That was a Celadon urn. So for every NPC that's randomly moving on screen, the game is making 1 RNG call per frame. There are like 7 or possibly 10 if you've still got the little pigeons on screen in Gregminster. And so like every frame, the RNG is advancing by either 7 or 10 places. And so for every frame that you're in Gregminster, Yeah, for every step you take in Gregminster, the RNG advances a whole bunch. So in live runs, we need to take a very specific number of steps before we exit Gregminster to guarantee that we exit in the same place every time. Well, sort of. It's actually not quite that simple, but I'm not going to explain that now. There's tutorials on how to do that. So like right now on this screen, there are a bunch of randomly moving NPCs. So the RNG value that the game is sort of on, it is advancing really super quickly whenever there's moving NPCs on the screen. And so for that, and we needed to make sure that we exited Gregminster in the best possible place to get the world map fights that we got. So that's why he stood still for a few frames, just waiting for the RNG to advance just the right amount before we exit the town. That's going to happen a lot. You'll see. Before we exit, before McDowell exits quite a lot of towns throughout this run, he will often pause for a few frames. And that's just to manipulate the RNG, often to give us a long stretch of world map steps with no fights. That's often the reason. I'll point it out the first few times it happens, but then I'm not going to point it out every time because it happens a lot. I feel like I was talking about something before that. Was it BIOS files and stuff? Did I get to the end of that? Yeah, so this is the first point at which the game, regardless of how far you've advanced the RNG, how many RNG calls the game has made, at this point the game overwrites the RNG value and resets it to a very specific value. Meaning that the value that it resets it to is determined by the actual hardware you're using. It's determined by I don't quite understand it, but it's determined by a timer of some kind that lives inside the actual hardware. So it lives inside BizHawk itself in this case, or it lives in the hardware of the PSTV if you're using a PSTV, or the PS1 or PS2. So even though I'm using the PSTV BIOS file, meaning the game starts on the same RNG value and I can use the same RNG manipulation setups as the PSTV run does, for the very early stuff, as soon as I fly to Magician's Island, the RNG value is in a completely different place to where it is at this point in the PSTV run. And of course, RNG is what determines what encounters you get and what moves bosses take. So in order to be able to manipulate what encounters you're going to get and how the boss fights are going to go, you need to know what RNG values you're on, and you need to manipulate the game based on where you are in the RNG. And as soon as you fly to Magician's Island, the BIOS file that you're using, if you're using an emulator, the BIOS file that you're using is no longer relevant. It's then dependent on what actual emulator you're using, or if you're playing on a console, the actual hardware is what determines the value that the RNG resets to. I hope that made some sort of sense. If anyone does want to know more about it, is interested in running the game, do ask anything you want to ask in the comments. I also have a live run, as I mentioned, on this channel. We're also going to be this, as we're doing the TAS, it is going to be glitched. So we're going to be, making use of all the known glitches in the game. Namely the bribe glitch that allows you to get out of boss fights, as you saw with the... Wait, did I fight the clay golem? Yeah, I think I did. Shit, I can't remember. Wasn't even paying attention. It's been so long since I did this bit of the task. Okay, I think I actually fought the clay golem. But, oh, sorry. Just trying to untangle myself from some wire here. Alright, now we're back in Gregminster. And possibly no one, but possibly a few eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed that the two previous times I spoke to Craze, I was actually like a step to the right and a step down, which is the furthest away from him you can possibly be when speaking to him, just to save a couple of steps in walking up to him. This time I've walked right up to the desk and am completely adjacent to him, and that's because Kanan needs to come and join you there. And so that time when you speak to Craze, if you speak to him like a step off adjacent, it will move you to that center spot. So I just run there. Now we appraise the question mark pot, and it is a Celadon, and then we sell it at lightning speed. And you may have caught that there, the little skip. It sort of looked like a little bit of lag, but it wasn't. It was McDowell just stopped running for a few frames. And that was because if I had just run straight out, I would have hit the world map in a... So the RNG advances basically once per step you take on the world map or in dungeons. And if I had just run straight out, I would have got an encounter between Gregminster and Rockland. So I paused for a few frames, allow the RNG to advance past the point where that fight lives in the RNG, so I get a nice clear space for my walk from Gregminster to Rockland. Now, Marco Cup game. This is an RNG reset, which is important in live runs. Not so important in a task, because it doesn't really... I can literally just watch what RNG value I'm on the entire time and plan it all frame by frame. But these Marco games were the bane of trying to make this run. Namely, how many do I need to do? Because you need money for this. Because you need to be able to bribe... You need to be able to bribe fights. You need to be able to bribe boss fights, which, as I mentioned, obviously you normally can't do, but there's a glitch in the game that lets you bribe boss fights. So you need lots of money. How much money do you need? You need enough money to see you through until you can recruit Jaspar. Because then you can just manipulate his dice game to triple your money loads of times and max out your money in seconds. So as soon as you recruit Jaspar, money's no longer an issue. But you need to play the right amount of cup games that will see you through to that point. Each cup game takes about 15 seconds. And so I didn't want to just play like 10 if I didn't need to play 10. Because if it turns out I get to the point where I recruit Jaspar, and in fact I've still got like 30k left and I only needed to play 7. That means I've then wasted 45 seconds. But then it wasn't just... So for the first time I planned this task through, I played only 3 Marco Cup games, thinking maybe I can manipulate it so much that I only need a little boost of 30k there. That will see me right the way through until I get Jaspar. I had in my head that I can recruit Jaspar much earlier than I actually could. And it turns out I was way off. I ran out of money way too early. And so the little pause there, again, to manipulate this little world map stretch to not give me any fights between Rockland and Mansifu. Yeah, so when I did the task, only playing 3 Marco Cup games, I ran out of money way too early, way before I was able to recruit Jaspar and then just have infinite money on tap. But then it wasn't just a simple case of going back to Marco, playing a few more cup games, because that messes with the RNG. Each Marco Cup game advances the RNG by, I can't even remember how much, like between 80 and 100 and something. That might be completely wrong, but it advances the RNG by a bit. And I ended up, as if you're counting, I ended up playing 7 Marco Cup games, which advanced the RNG by quite a bit, which meant that every dungeon had a different sequence of fights. It affects a lot going forward in the run. There, bribe the boss fight. I can't remember if I actually did bribe the clay golem or not, if we've seen the bribe glitch yet, but there it is. You hit bribe, and then you hit X again so quickly that the text doesn't come up in the bribe box. If you allow the text to come up in the bribe box, it will just say you failed to make a deal because the game shouldn't let you bribe bosses. But if you hit X quickly enough that text doesn't come up, as long as you have enough money to actually pay what the cost of the bribe would be, the game lets you do it. So yeah, basically I programmed the TAS, playing only 3 Marco Cup games, and got right up to... Oh yeah, that's annoying. I think do I get 2 fights? Do I get another fight here? No, straight up. Yeah, I initially did only 3 Marco Cup games, ran out of money way too early, then had to go back to that point in the task, play a bunch more Marco Cup games, which then meant that I was all unaligned. Well, what do you call it? Like, it was desynced. Like, I would then, just jump back to that point in the bribe glitch again, jump back to that point in the task, play some more Marco Cup games, and then let the task play out from what I had programmed after having only played 3. But then the fights were all in a different order. The fights were all happened completely differently. I had to redo the entire thing from that point on. Yeah, figuring out how many Marco games I needed to play was a pain in the ass, but 7 was the second attempt that I made, and actually it worked out pretty well, and I'm thankful I didn't have to do any more than 2 experiments there. 7 turned out to be a pretty good number. There we go, and we do fight Varkas and Sidonia. So now you might be wondering, well, if you can just bribe all the bosses and you can get to a point in the game where if you're tassing it and executing the inputs literally frame perfectly as you do in a TAS, if you can just bribe all the bosses, why do we need to actually fight anything? If you can get however much money you need and if we can bribe all the fights, why can we not just stay level 1 through the game and never fight anything? Well, there are a couple of answers to that. The first and most obvious one is the duels. You can't escape, as far as I know, you can't avoid having to do the duels with Quanda and Tio. Obviously, there are only 3 duel fights in this game, which doesn't seem like many. It seems like it sort of feels like there are more, but there aren't. There's only the duel with Hero and Quanda, then there's the duel with Pan and Tio, then there's a duel with Hero and Tio, and that's it. And obviously, if we're doing a 100% run, it's important to get Pan up all sorts of levels for his fight with Tio. But sorry, I'm just turning the music down in my headphones a little bit. But this isn't any percent, so when we're just gonna let Pan die. But we need to make sure that Hero McDowell is leveled up enough that he's gonna be able to do those duels. So there are a few fights that we have to do in order to boost our levels. And then later on, there is, I think, maybe 2 fights that I do in this after all the duels are done, and that's for Champions Rune. If you played the game, I'm sure you know what Champions Rune is, but I'll explain it nearer the time as well. Oh, Ted. What have you done, eh? This bit's always tedious. It's quite nice, you know, that it's comforting to know that it's being skipped through as quickly as it's possible to be skipped through. Literally pressing and releasing X every frame. Just every other frame X. Because obviously if you just put X in every frame, it's like you're holding it and then it doesn't do anything. Oh no, Pan. You said you were going to get medicine. I'm shook. See if you can see the second dialogue choice being selected. Did you see it? Oh. Run through the rain, and there was a little bit of a stop there as well. If anyone that noticed. Again, it looks, when you're watching the game back in full speed like this, it looks a little bit like lag. But paused there. That pause was to set up the next world map walk we're going to do, which is from Gregminster to Lennenkamp, because that screen, on that screen with the rain, RNG is advancing quite a lot. I can only assume it's advancing because of the rain animation. And I don't think it's advancing very much, so I don't quite know how that works, but maybe there's an NPC on screen somewhere. But it's not, even though there are a lot of NPCs on screen, in the inn there, there's no RNG advancement. None of them are moving at all. They're all just static. And there's no RNG advancement here either. Everyone must have just gone home. They're still hiding in their houses after the storm, I guess. Yeah, no RNG advancement through in Gregminster during this bit, so I couldn't use this bit. I had to go back to the. I couldn't use just the old pause on the screen trick to advance the RNG to a good place where I'm not going to get any fights on my world map walk. Had to do it on the rainy screen. And off we go. Yeah, I decided not to do any kind of timer. I was thinking about doing, like, setting up the splits to compare against, like, the world record live run for, you know, any percent. But I just thought, that's kind of dumb. Like, we all know it's going to be quicker. Although, actually, the whole run only ended up being, I think, 10 minutes quicker than the live world record run, which I was a little bit... I was really hoping that I'd be able to completely blow it out of the water and have this, like, mind-blowing time. Like, under 2 hours or something. From the TAS. But no. It's the world record any percent run is, I believe, 2 hours and 42 minutes, and I believe this is 2 hours and 32 minutes. So, like, it's not even that much quicker, really. Which is a little bit disappointing, but there you go. The holder of that world record, by the way, I should mention, its handle is 01337. And it's really thanks to that guy that I am able to run this game, to speedrun this game at all. If it was, he worked out how all the RNG stuff works. He made a tool where you can input the RNG value that you're on, and then it will tell you and which area you're walking around, and it will tell you what fights you're gonna get, and there's other stuff the tool does as well, all for the RNG manipulation of this game. And without that, if he hadn't put that work in, worked out how to break the game and made a tool for doing it, there's no way I would have ever been able to work that out myself. So shout outs to Zero. He holds world record in like 3 of the 4 categories of this game's run, so it's like any percent and 100%, and it's glitched and glitchless. And I believe Zero holds the world record in any percent, glitched and glitchless, and the 100%, also called the 108% glitchless, which is the run that I do and have 2nd place in, because there's no way I'm beating there's no way I'm beating Zero's time. Bribe glitch all 3 of these. Free Varkas and Sidonia. Love the bass in this music. Alright, and we're off. And I didn't see any pause in movement there, which is lucky. I'm assuming I don't get any world map fights. Great. Oh, that green dude, I hate him. He was stood in the way, so I had to do a little shuffle to the left. Hi guys, we're back. So yeah, I haven't got a timer on. I know when the official timing for TAS, I believe, is from like console power on, which will be basically from the start of this video. I mean, there's a few seconds at the start of the video before I actually press play. At the start of this YouTube video, I mean, before I actually press play on the TAS recording. And then, depending on how much more I have to say after the 2.5 hours of this video, this video might go on a little bit longer. But I think that the end time for this is like 2 hours, 32 minutes. Oh, long pause there. But yeah, I'll do an official timer for it at some point, but I didn't want to be remembering to hit splits at certain times and stuff while I'm just talking through it. So yeah, that long pause outside Lenin camp there. It's, again, same reason. If I hadn't taken a pause, I needed to find a spot in the RNG where there's a gap of 40 steps or whatever it is from Lenin camp to Mount Tiger Wolf that don't contain any fights. And, yeah, I stood still for quite a long time, and you might be thinking, at what point does it become... What's the term? A false economy? I don't know. To stand still for so long to avoid fights, at what point does it become... Would it have been quicker to just get an encounter on the way? Well, the answer to that is about 2 seconds. each hitting an encounter on the world map or in a dungeon, hitting an encounter and escaping from it, going from the point where it stops you moving when you hit the encounter and for the point where to the point where you can start moving again. It's basically 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Which is, approximately 120 frames in this game. So if I was just standing still on a screen in order to avoid one fight or to save myself one fight, if I'm standing still for less than 120 frames, then it's worth it if it's going to save me at least one encounter. That's kind of how I thought of it throughout the run. And 120 frames is a lot, especially in terms of RNG advancement anyway. If you're in a town like Lennencamp or Rockland, especially Gregminster, where there's lots of moving NPCs, the RNG is like rapidly advancing. And so if you've got 120 frames, if you can potentially stand still for up to 120 frames, that's a long stretch of RNG you've got to find a nice juicy spot in where there are very few battles. And I don't think... Yeah, so I got a nice world map spot where there were no encounters on the world map. This was the best Mount Tiger Wolf I could find. There are just so many fights up this fucking mountain. And that was because they're just standing still in a dungeon or that mountain is not going to do anything. When you're in a place where you can get random encounters, the RNG is not advancing every frame like it is when you're on a screen where there are moving NPCs. It only advances when you move. So if I had just run straight out of the mountain there, I would have got a world map fight between the end of the on the walk to Saradi. So I needed to advance the RNG a few places, so that I, hit, like I say, hit a nice spot in the RNG where there aren't any fights. So the way to do that is to just take a certain number of steps. I didn't have to walk back and forth like that. I just thought it was funniest to do it that way. All right, taking care of business with Odessa. They'll think we banged. And I don't do anything to disabuse them of that notion. There we go, no pause there. It's only a very short walk, to be fair, so it's likely that not too likely that I'd get a world map encounter anyway. And I can't remember how the walk back down Mount Tiger Wolf is for encounters. There's one. Oh yeah, and because you can't ever see the text when I escape from fights like that, you can kind of hear whether I selected bribe or run, based on whether you can hear just listen. Okay, so you can hear the down, hear down being pressed twice. But another way you can tell whether I choose bribe or run, that was a run, is the size of the dialogue box that comes up. If it's the big one, the big one like that, it says A was the name I gave him to spend the least time on the title screen. A and his party started to run off, which is a lot of text, and it needs the big dialogue box, where if it just has the little thin one, then it just says paid whatever 1,000 bits. So if you see the thin dialogue box, that means it was a bribe. If we get the slightly chunkier dialogue box, that means it... I see that green dude again. I had to nudge to the left to get around him. If it's the bigger dialogue box, then it means I was able to run. And you can also kind of hear it in the menu, but it's not as to whether I press down once or twice, but it's not super clear. Now, I think I actually fight this fight as well. Yeah. Because basically, I'm only fighting the fights that are required to get Mugdol up to a decent level to duel Quanda. And as we cross over into... as we move over into the next sort of section of the world map in a minute, we'll go through the Fortress of Quaba in the live run. And, you know, I figured this out in casual play. I'm sure a lot of people have. If before you go and get your castle, you go down to the Great Forest and you fight a group of 6 kobolds, your level jumps way up, usually to level 22. Which puts you way above the level you would normally be when fighting stuff in Toran Castle. It means you can let go all the fights in Toran Castle. Yeah, it's a nice juicy level jump there. I did experiment with not doing that. With just going straight to Toran Castle, because I thought it might save time if I could manipulate the game in such a way that I didn't really need to be that super high level at that point. And I'll just stay low level. I'll just escape and bribe all the fights until I end up in Great Forest organically, as when the game takes me there, and that's when I'll do the big 6 kobold fight, and it will jump me up the 22 levels. Because I'll still be super low level, right? I wouldn't have, in theory, if I did skip the 6 kobold fight, progress as the game wanted me to, but actually just skip all the fights, I'd still be super low level by the time the game organically brings me to Great Forest. But that turned out to be pretty expensive. It means I have to bribe a lot of fights that I can otherwise let go. Which meant I would have needed to do more Marco Cup games. So it didn't really end up saving any time, so I just, after we're done in Seika here, I just go straight down and do it. And yeah, there are a few things from the live run that I wanted to try and find a way to not have to do in the TAS. Like right at the beginning, fighting the 3 bonbons to get the Celadon urn. I thought, you know, maybe I can... Maybe there's a way... Maybe I don't have to do that. Maybe I only have to fight 1 fight. But no, yes, you need the Celadon urn to get 10 grand to play the Marco Cup games. If anyone watching is familiar with the live run, you may notice that I did miss a little piece of the live run setup for Holy Rune Celadon urn, and that is that I didn't do the formation switch. So I'm just going back a bit now to the 3 bonbon fight. Between the 3 bonbon fight and the 3... Fucking hell, mosquito. I wanted to say mushroom. 3 mosquito fight. Fights where I get the Celadon urn and the Holy Rune. In the live run, we switch Cleo and Ted around. And that is because of the way the game allocates stat growth. When Cleo's in that position, she gets much better magic stat growth than when she's in 4th position. But in this, we don't really care about that, so I saved a few seconds by not switching those 2 around. Do I have a world map fight? Yeah, I thought so. Let go. Yeah, I remember trying to find a spot where I could do this whole long walk without any world map fights, because I'm able to a lot of the time in my live run. So I thought, you know, maybe a long gap is not that hard to come by, but where I happened to land in the RNG, it is, and I couldn't. I had to take a fight there. There you go. See, first step straight onto a kobold fight, and I had to Yeah, that was it. So I stood still for quite a while in Great Forest there, with the RNG advancing to a point where I'm literally one step away from a 6 kobold fight. There's a slightly earlier 6 kobold fight that I could have done, but they killed Cleo because we're so low level that the Cleo's speed is not high enough. It's possible to have Cleo's speed be higher, and if I had had the foresight, I could have manipulated her stats, probably. But it would have meant doing formation swaps and stuff. But I didn't. I got to that point in the game, and Cleo's speed was not fast enough to act before the 6 kobolds. And I wasn't prepared to go back and manip the fights I'd done in order to make her speed better, because that would then affect the RNG for the rest of the run up to that point, and I'd have to redo the whole thing, and just quickly, you'll notice I ran into Kaku, then out, and then back in again. That's so that it appears on Vicky's teleport menu. There's a little Vicky hack. We'll come back to it. Yeah, so the first 6 kobold fight that you can get at that point in the RNG, I get Cleo to do a firestorm thing, but the kobolds kill her before she has a chance to get it off. So, and I tried moving her, formation-wise, moving her to the back rank. But actually, the amount of time that took, it was quicker just to let the RNG advance past that fight and wait till the next 6 kobold fight. Now, Taiho. God, this is so satisfying to watch. As far as we know, by the way, it isn't possible for Taiho to lose on his first throw. To throw the dice out of the bowl, or for Taiho to throw a losing roll at all. I don't think. Yeah, long pause there. So Taiho has to roll a score, and then you have to roll. So yeah, Taiho just rolled anything, and then. So okay, I should explain the Shinshirorin problem, the dice game problem in this game. Dice game, in a live run, is impossible to manipulate. Because when you're on the dice game screen, whether there's text scrolling, Taiho's explaining the game, or you're on a menu, or you're choosing the amount you're betting, or whatever, every single frame the RNG is advancing. So, it isn't humanly possible to select all the menus and skip past the text. Just, by the way, count the encounters I have through this. That was 1. This is 2. Spoilers, there aren't any more. I found a real good spot. Yeah, so it isn't possible to manipulate the dice game in a live run because you can't select inputs frame perfectly in that way. I've tried. It just isn't possible. But it does mean that for a TAS, it's actually quite nice, because all you have to do when pressing confirm on your dice throw, if the dice don't come out your way, just have that confirm press 1 frame later, and then see what that comes out with. Nope, 1 frame later than that. So when doing a TAS of the game, manipulating the dice game is actually really easy, which is nice and refreshing. So basically, if during a live run you get a really shitty... Did you see what I called the castle there? I called it A. If you... what was I fucking saying? Yeah, if in a live run, the dice game isn't possible to manipulate. So if you get really shitty Taiho luck, that means that the RNG has advanced a lot. You're much further along in the RNG than you would be if you'd had a quick dice game. So that can really fuck with everything. So when you get to Toran Castle, you just have no idea where you are in the RNG. You have no idea what fights you're going to come up against. And you can't manip the zombie dragon fight. That's really for different reasons, but yeah. So that's where this tool that Zero has made comes in again. He's has a tool where you can plug in the encounter. This is the Vicky glitch, by the way. Invisible Vicky. Sorry, I know I'm jumping around, but Invisible Vicky only works when you have Cleo in the final slot of your party. Which she just appears in the final slot of your party in this bit, but later on we have to actually manually put her there. Yeah, so if you have Cleo in the final spot in your party, you can get the teleport menu before you even recruit Vicky. Just go down and press X in that spot, and she's there. And that's why if we hadn't gone into Kaku and then out and back in again, Kaku wouldn't have appeared on the teleport menu. And you may have also noticed that on the way back from Great Forest after we did the 6 Kobold fight, we went into Kuan and then back out again. That was so that would appear on Vicky's teleport menu. So that was just that 1 6 soldier fight. And if I remember rightly, yeah, that's the only encounter we get. And I do a little jig outside the door. And then in. There we go. The wheel obviously works on RNG as well. And the little jig I did was just to advance it to a point where I got a first try wheel. I was talking about something before I was talking about Invisible Vicky. Can't remember what it was, though. Nope, it's gone. Yeah, I got quite a few encounters on the way out, which is annoying. I think that's the last one, though. In the live run, the live any % run, Rock is recruited, and as are various other characters throughout. And so I'm told that I don't I don't know the live any % run. Really, other than in the sense that I've watched it and asked the guys who do it about it. But the reason they recruit Rock and a handful of others is because you need to get your castle to level 3 in order for Marco to appear in Warrior's Village later on. And it's important that Marco appears in Warrior's Village later on because his cup game resets the RNG, so you can use it to set up RNG manipulations for Necklord's Castle, Clon Cave, etc. So we have to, and you need a certain number of characters in order to get your castle up to level 3, so certain characters get recruited. Took an interesting route around the houses in Kuan there. I was surprised to find that was actually fewer steps than the way you would the way that makes sense to go in the live run. Fewer obstacles. Oh, was I talking about the Zero's RNG tool? I think I was. So yeah, when you're running through a dungeon, namely, in this case, after the dice game, that's it. So there's no way of predicting, once you've done Taiho's dice game, where in the RNG you will land. You will get to Toran Castle, and then we kill Kraze, of course, always kill Kraze. You'll get to Toran Castle and have no idea where you are in the RNG. And Zero's tool allows you to plug in the fights that you get, and it will tell you where you are in the RNG. And so as you go through Toran Castle, you work out where you are in the RNG, and that's important because you need to know where you are in order to be able to manipulate the wheel. And then to know what encounters you're going to get in Great Forest, and then the Dwarf Trail, Dwarf Vault. And if you're a real ninja, you can, maybe look ahead a little bit and see where there might be a nice juicy gap with no fights, and maybe take a couple extra steps somewhere to make sure that happens. Now where I just recruited Sergei there, that was when I did my initial run with Marco, with only 3 Marco games. My initial TAS, when I built the initial TAS, I only did 3 Marco games because I had in my head that was where I can recruit Jaspar, because if you go down the stairs, Jaspar is there. But he doesn't let you play the dice game yet. He just says, oh, you took my best customer. And that's it. And so I had played only 3 Marco games, like, gone to, like, painstaking effort to make myself not run out of money by the time I got there. Recruited Sergei, went down the stairs, spoke to Jaspar, and then he didn't let me play the game, and and then I realized, of course you can't recruit him there, so I was gonna have to do the whole Dwarf Trail, Vault, bribing, Gigantes, and Dragon, and there was no way I was gonna be able to, so I was gonna have to go back to Rockland Marco, play more cup games, and then reroute the whole fucking thing. Which is a pain in the ass. Oh, you can bribe that assassin as well. Just, yeah. He's not even expensive, I don't think. In general, the cost of bribes are 3 times what you would get from them if you were to win the fight. Some of the bosses don't seem to quite follow. Most of them do, I think. Maybe some of them don't. Like, Aim Guide is only like 30 or 32 grand to bribe. Does he only give you 10? I can't remember. And then Barbarossa, the gold dragon, is only like 30 grand, I think. But then I don't think you actually get any money for beating him at all. So this is where, you notice we did that in a funny order. It was a bit quick, so you may not have, but it's rather than just, I wanted to bring Cleo, Victor, and Eileen, but rather than just putting them in my party in that order, because that's the order they're in the menu, Cleo, then Victor, then Eileen. We skipped past Cleo, put Victor and Eileen in my party, then went back up and selected Cleo, so that Cleo was in the last slot in the party, which means, which is how you get Invisible Vicky to work, for whatever reason. Again, a little pause before running through the woods. And then I don't think this is a particularly good run through the woods in terms of encounters. But it's as good as we're going to get. There are quite a few runs through various points in the game, through dungeons or forests or mountains or whatever it might be, where I sort of watch them back and think, oh, I'm sure I could find a better spot in the RNG there. So this is what, 3 fights I've had now? Is there another one? No? 3 fights is not so bad, I guess. But there are definitely times like Vault. Man, Vault. There are definitely points in the game where I'm like, I'm sure there's a way I could find a better spot in the RNG to start this dungeon on, to not get all these fights. But that would mean like waiting around in a village beforehand for so long that it would make it not worth it. A lot of the time there just isn't a great spot available. And there'd probably be ways. Let's just do a quick rune swap here. Look at this menu. I love watching this. Yeah, if you wanted to go full commit on this, I reckon if you wanted to properly map out where all the gaps in the fights are that are roughly close to where you might land in various places, and plan out from the beginning, like, you know, spending this many frames here, and so that, and then, yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know that it would be worth it, really. Like, there comes a certain point where the RNG is just going to do what it's going to do. That's what I decided anyway. I think this is pretty much as good as I'm prepared to get it. I was, you know, I would just approach the start of a dungeon, and if it turned out I was in a really bad spot for encounters, I'll wait in the village, in whatever village I was in beforehand, for however many frames I need to get as good a spot as I can for it to be worth the wait, and then just go. Although I didn't do any waiting around. Didn't look like I was hanging around for any frames there. Do I get a good run up trail? I really can't remember. Oh, that's pretty good. That was a lot of steps. Yeah, so that must have been the gap I was aiming for. Then after this, because I don't remember this being a particularly good. Although that was a fair amount of steps as well. Yeah, that wasn't. Kuramimi cutscene. Oh, yeah, I remember that. I remember being so annoyed that I wasn't going to get to the end of that mountain before hitting that fight. And I couldn't go and... there was no way I could get myself there a few steps earlier. Because I hadn't waited any frames at all. In Elf Village as it was. It wasn't like I could go back and just wait for a few less frames, so that a few fewer frames, so that I didn't get that fight on the end. Yeah, I was just annoyed, and I just had to take it. Quick sharpening there. Again, that's for the jewels. But that's all the sharpening will do. And again, I toyed with the idea of only sharpening his weapon to level 8. Which I think is a thing that is done in the live runs sometimes. If money's going bad. But I think that is more often than not going to mean another round of the duel. Of the probably both the Quanda and the Tio duel. Which is going to amount to more time than just sharpening that one extra weapon. And I pick up the Sunbeam Crystal there. Sunbeam Crystal, is that what it's called? Because it sells for 10 grand, and I need that, but my money does run out. My Marco money doesn't see me all the way through. But picking up the Sunbeam Crystal there and then selling it is quicker than just doing it, than if I had just done an 8th Marco fight. So I had a really long stretch. I don't know if you're watching or conscious of it, but I had a really long, nice, juicy stretch at the start of Vault without any fights. And then in the the last big room where I could get encounters was there's no RNG advancement in these puzzle rooms, so you'll never get fights in the puzzle rooms. But I had a nice big chunk at the beginning without any fights, and now and that was nice, but now it's every few steps. You get a 60-step grace period after each fight. Then the RNG starts advancing again. Again, this is a puzzle room, so no RNG advancement here. Fight there. There's a chest with 5 grand in it over here. And then another fight. Yeah, see, they're just every few steps. Which is a real shame, but there wasn't another spot I could find without having to wait for just stand around for ages in Dwarf Village. But then if I had done that, it wouldn't even save enough time to make all the standing around worth it. Yeah. That's a recurring theme throughout this run. annoying amount of fights in a place, but the only way I could have avoided it is to stand around for ages on a screen with moving NPCs. But doing so would have made the time saved by not getting so many encounters would have cancelled out. Anyway, yeah, so you'll see that's the only time I go in an item shop, I think, to sell that Sunbeam Crystal, cheeky 10k. Do a little, yeah, just a little stumble there. By stumble, I mean little pause to advance the RNG. And I can't remember what the walk down trail is like. I mean, pretty good. That was a nice, decent stretch without any fights. Probably going to be every few steps again now. Oh, yeah. Oh, crap. Sorry, Kirkus. Your village is gone. Awkward. Ah, it's disgusting. Eh. I mean, it was okay, I guess. Ooh. Yeah, I'm not going to have much to say about the cutscenes in general. Nothing going on with them except a whole lot of confirm. Back here. Yeah, that's it. And I had toyed with... I had decided that I wasn't going to bother bringing Eileen as I did. And giving Cleo Earth Rune. Because I thought it was quicker to just not have to bother with all of that rune swapping business. And I didn't switch the Holy Rune over there either. From Gremio to Victor. As I now have done. So I thought I'll keep Cleo's Fire Rune on her. I'll Dancing Flames those guys. It's a slower animation. The Dancing Flames spell takes longer than the Voice of Earth spell. But it means I don't have to do all the rune swapping. I don't have to bring Eileen and then select her to go home when Valeria joins. But I then got to the bit that I think is just after this war fight, where there were several things. The bit where I got just after this war fight, where Victor joins your... It's just you and Victor after a little cutscene, and you have to go to Kaku and tell Flick he's being a twat. And you have to then go and speak. You have to then do a party swap to put someone in your party with Holy Rune so you can run. And just for that little bit, it's annoying and it wastes time. But I did that. And then got to Saunière Prison with Cleo with a Fire Rune. And she wasn't fast enough to act first. So I had to do some rune swapping there. And also I needed an opportunity to switch Holy Rune around because Gremio was about to die. And it came back to, shit, I need I need Cleo to have an Earth Rune before we hit that bit where we're going to go over to Sonier. And I need to have swapped the Holy Rune around before that point as well. And the only place it made sense to do it was in Elf Village, as I did it and as it happens in the live run. Now, these war fights, again, like, the main thing of note I want to say about the war fights is that they reset the RNG. Again, depending on what hardware you're using. Well, I mean, they always reset the RNG, but the value that they reset the RNG to is determined by a timer inside the hardware. That is of little to no consequence when doing a TAS, but for live running of this game, it is key. The fact that the game resets the RNG to consistent values, mostly consistent values, at certain predictable points in the game, means that the game is manipulatable. If it didn't, it would be very, very difficult to manipulate the game. Again, nothing we can do about that fight there because, as I said, the RNG has just been reset. I could have maybe so it reset to the beginning of the war fight. I could then maybe have fought the war fight in such a way that lands me in a spot where I can run through the castle without getting any encounters, but I think it would have cost me more than 2 seconds to do that. Three-turn Quanda. Basically, we don't ever want Quanda to defend. If he attacks, fine, we can just desperate attack him. If he desperate attacks, fine, we can just defend. And both of those are effectively us getting maximum damage on him. If he defends, all we can do is attack him, and then it gets like half damage, and it adds an extra turn onto the whole fight. So I had to, again, potentially some eagle-eyed people may have noticed that when running out onto this little scene, when coming through the door, I didn't like run tight to the edge as you know, it's a TAS. Normally you would expect the guy to run like tight round the edges of everything to like optimize movement. I ran to the middle of the door and walked through the middle of the door rather than cutting tight in on the edge, as would make sense with optimal movement. The reason I did that was because taking that one extra step to the middle of the door advanced the RNG to a point where Quanda does what we need him to do in the duel. First time I tried, I ran tight, as is, you know, habit in a TAS. Running tight, optimal movement. But then the place that landed us in the RNG meant that Quanda did loads of defending in the duel, and it was just taking a long time, so I took one extra step, start the duel on a different RNG value. Quanda behaves differently. More cutscenes. More of the most intense mashing of the X button that this game has ever known. It's this bit, by the way. Shit, just knocked the microphone. This bit where Victor joins you when Flick runs off because he's just being a little bitch, and Victor joins you here. Now Victor has the Holy Rune, so we're at running speed. Whereas before I'd given him this, he didn't, and in the live 100% run, I haven't given him the Holy Rune yet. So we could only have walking speed for this bit. So we had to exit the war room screen, the third floor, re-enter, and then come back, speak to Sanchez, put Stallion in the party, I think, or Gremio, and then run. And it was a whole thing that wasn't ideal. Here is where we can recruit Jaspar. And if any speedrunners of this game are watching, just, you'll know how much of a pain in the ass a dice game is. Just take a minute. Look at that. But it's not over yet. Obviously, it's easy, like, when tassing. I haven't achieved anything great here by ruining Jaspar financially. There's no great skill in having the TAS play out this way. It's just so satisfying to watch. If you have speedrun this game, then I'm sure you can appreciate that. So yeah, I had to work out the optimal number of Marco Cup games to play earlier that would get me to this point in the game. Because now I can make this happen. If you bet all of your winnings so far, I'll take the bet. Sure. Ah, it's beautiful. Don't think I'll ever get tired of watching that. So now we don't, in the immortal words of Forrest Gump, we don't have to worry about money anymore. Which is good. It's one less thing. And the thing with these war fights, although the RNG resets are pretty much inconsequential because we can, when programming frame perfect inputs, you can manipulate the RNG regardless of when it resets to what. But this war fight has reset to a certain value, and so if the enemy army is going to do something awkward, there's no way of us getting around that. This fight is really good. They just charge twice, which means we can magic twice, which is the quickest thing. It sorts them right out. There's one... Who is it? Is it Griffith? No. Who is it? Can't remember. Maybe it's Yuba at the end. Or is it Sonya? Well, Sonya's a whole different thing. I'll explain when I get there. I can't remember. There's a war fight somewhere along the line where basically you don't want to have to use bow in war fights. Bow beats magic. I'm sure you know how to play this game if you're watching this. And it takes by far the longest to complete. Using magic is quickest. Then charge can vary. Using a weak charge doesn't tend to take as long as using a strong charge. They stay there, hacking the enemy army to pieces for longer if you're using a stronger charge. But bow just takes forever. They just keep firing fucking for like 20 seconds or even longer. It's just so long. So you want to avoid using bow in those war fights if you can. But there are some where... Because, like I say, and you can't really manipulate the RNG there. If that particular war fight resets the RNG to a value that says the enemy army uses magic first, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to use bow. Or sometimes you can use magic against magic, and then you either do your magic or the enemy does their magic. And I can't work out what the deciding factor is there. And again, the Milich war fight that we just lost resets the RNG as well. And so there's nothing we can do about getting that little encounter with the vine things there. Little pause to advance the RNG for no world map fights. And now, while we've got Stallion with us, although, to be fair, we have Stallion with us throughout most of the rest of the game, but while we've got the fast world map speed, we just go around and visit all of these places. Although, thinking about it now, we have Stallion with us pretty much the entire rest of the game. Did I even need to do this? Well, I can't have lost any time, because I would need to do these walks either way. Or would I have? Or would I have needed to do that walk from Sonia to Rickon? So I'm just thinking, because I basically always have Stallion in my party throughout the rest of this run, so I will always have the fast world map speed. And so I think there might be a couple of wasted seconds there, because I don't think I really needed to do that walk from Sonia to Rickon there. I think I could have just gone to the 3 places and then just done the walk down from Taean to Rickon when we have to do it organically. And no, because I wouldn't have Stallion in my party there, because I have to have Gen and Kamandar. Okay, no, ignore me. Fine. Sorry, I thought I'd made a boo-boo there. I'm sure there are some boo-boos in this where I've wasted time, where I didn't need to do anything, where I didn't need to do something that I do. And of course, if anyone sees anything like that, where it looks like I've just wasted time and could have saved time, please let me know. Yeah, so we have to take Stallion out. Oh, we do but we do that walk anyway. So I didn't need to do the walk all the way across from Sonia to Rickon. The reason we do it in the live run is because we don't want to risk doing that world map walk there that we just did down. Because if we get encounters, we will probably have to bribe them, because you can't be certain where you'll be in the RNG at that point. Not specifically enough to know for that tight, short little walk whether you'll get an encounter or not. So you'll probably have to bribe it, and money is very precarious at this point in a live run. So in general, we blinking mirror back to Vicky and then teleport to Rickon. But I walked there. I walked there on the world map, rendering my walk from Sonia across to Rickon earlier with the fast world map speed pointless. So I have in fact wasted a few seconds there. Dang it. Oh well. And yeah, cutscene. What are we doing? Oh, this is just a whole bunch of cutscenes, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to have a huge amount to say for the next few minutes, probably. Just watch the game play out super fast. I do enjoy watching the menus. And I was pretty fastidious with making sure that each menu was frame perfect. You know, every selection, every up or down, every confirm was all on the earliest frame it was possible for it to be on. Save for a couple of party selection menus where RNG is advancing, and so I just pause on the menu for a few frames to advance it to an optimal point. I'll point those out when we get there, if I remember. I should say that if you did want to just... I should have said... God, did I say this at the beginning? I can't remember. I don't think so. I probably should have. If you don't want to watch this with me blathering over the top of it, there's a version... I'm going to also upload a version that is just the video. For if you're, you know... Either if you already know how the RNG in this game works, or you just don't want to hear me talk about it. If you're not interested, you just want to watch the game play out super fast, fine. I'm going to upload versions with and without commentary. Over to Jean. Okay, now we have to do a rune swap. So we've taken Flick's lightning rune off of him, and we've given him Cleo's old fire crystal, fire rune. The reason we've done that is because I mentioned briefly earlier that by the time when we get to Sonier, Cleo's speed is not high enough. Did I mention this earlier? I think I mentioned this earlier. When we get to Sonier, Cleo's speed is not high enough to cast a spell to act before nightmares, the little playing card enemies. And we need to fight a couple of those because we need to get Magdal up some levels because there's the duel with Teos coming up. That's why we did a little formation swap there. So for the first one of those fights, we're going to fight two of them, basically. Two groups of 3 nightmares. First one's here, and we're going to have Flick use Dancing Flames. If we still had Cleo with the Fire Rune, as I did when I first got here, Flick would still... The Earth Rune would be nowhere. It would still be on... The Earth Rune would be nowhere. It would still be on Eileen. Flick would still have his Lightning Rune, and the only group spell there is... whatever it's called, the level 2 one that's not strong enough to kill him. And Cleo wouldn't act first. Which is a problem because so we wouldn't be able to kill these things before they act, which is a problem because they take fucking ages to do anything. Their animation is so long, and 3 of them is just absolutely not. So we had to make sure that Cleo has an Earth Rune by this point, and the only good time to do that was in Elf Village. And we had to give Flick Fire Rune because the Fire Rune has a spell on it that can deal with those 3 cards, Dancing Flames. And yeah, so Flick does the first one, everyone goes up some levels, Cleo goes up some levels, and if I had left her in the formation position she was in, her speed would have gone up to 89, which is still not enough to act before the cards. The nightmares with the cards. I call them the cards because they look like playing cards. But if I move her to the front position that she's currently in, her speed stat goes up to 90. One more. Which is just enough to mean that she acts first before these things, meaning that she can then use Voice of Earth on the second lot of them. And I wanted to do 2 fights with him so that McDowell can go up a decent amount of levels. That sort of seemed like it made sense as I was saying it, but I don't know if it made any sense to listen to. Sorry if it didn't. There we go. Oh, yeah! Again, I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but I kept getting an encounter literally the step before walking into this room. And it was super annoying. So, downstairs, where I got the encounters with the soldiers, and when I freed Lucan, you trigger a little walking cutscene animation thing. So when you move into a certain point, the game takes over and you're not running anymore, you're at walking speed. So and that happens quite a lot throughout the game. You know, you hit a certain point and then a cutscene starts, and so he stops running and just walks to the point where the cutscene happens. I'm sure you know what I mean. So normally with the TAS, you want to make sure you're running the maximum number of steps so that when the game takes over and makes him walk, he's got the fewest amount of steps to walk before before where the cutscene starts, if that makes sense. But I had to play around with that so much downstairs in Sonier with the Lucan cutscene in order to cut down on the number of running steps I was taking, so that I didn't trigger the encounter that I kept getting on the very step where I was about to walk into the room where Gremio just died. Which I sort of feel like maybe we should take a moment for, but I feel like, you know, the moment's passed now. And I've seen it happen so many goddamn times, I'm just desensitized to it now. Alright. Battle at Scarlatitia Castle. Ugh. Oh, this is it? Yeah. There's not really anything we can do about the fact that Milich does magic there, and if we try and magic right back at him, his magic wins. So we have to bow, which is super annoying because it takes ages. Like, all of these war fights take a lot longer than they do in my live run, because in my live run, I'm doing a 100% all-star recruitment run, which means that my army numbers are a lot larger, which must mean I just have more power when I charge, because it seems to take way more turns to wipe out their army when the Liberation Army is much smaller than it does when the Liberation Army is bigger. Which makes sense, I guess. Yeah, and I tried real hard to find a way of fighting that war fight with Milich, so that it lands me in a spot in the RNG where I can run through Scarlatitia Castle without getting any encounters, but I could not do it. That was as good as I could get, and you know, I always got one encounter running through this castle, no matter how I did the fight, how I did the war fight. Yeah, we kill Milich. Oh yes, okay. So I forgot to mention Quanda. We recruited. You may have noticed, and the reason for that is I had assumed that it would always be quicker to just mash through the dialogue options, kill him, whatever. If you kill Quander, it turns out, and it's been years since I've played this game in any other way than recruiting all 108 stars. So I either didn't know or had forgotten this, but if you kill Quander, Windy appears and does a whole big villain monologue. And it actually ends up taking about like half a second longer if you kill Quander than if you just select the second dialogue option twice and just recruit him. So we recruited Quander. No such saving grace for Milich though. He had to die. I wish I could say I was sadder about it. Oh, now we're about to get our ass handed to us again by Tio. So you notice we choose pretty much the weakest charge options here. Fortunately, Juppo is the weakest, and he has a very short... You can't skip the text that they say, which is annoying. He has a very short thing that he says. He says, "I hate trouble." And then Flick is also very weak. And it's weird. The weaker the charge you select is, the shorter the whole Tio's army charging over to you thing lasts. If you select your strongest fighters, he spends ages there beating the shit out of you, but if you just select your weakest ones, he just comes over and just sort of nudges you a little bit and then runs away, which is kind of weird. But and it also happens, Juppo happens to be the weakest charge option you've got. He also happens to have one of the shortest dialogues when you select him. Flick then also is very weak and has a very as a charger in these in these big war fights, and he also has a very short bit of dialogue. I then chose Valeria. She has quite a long bit of dialogue, but the choices that I made in the war fight affect where the RNG lands. And RNG obviously determines how Tio behaves in that duel. And the first couple of goes I had, the couple of most obvious ways to fight the war fight result in Tio defending for like for the first like 2 turns. No, well, probably not actually. For at least the first turn, which is not good, because we want that duel to last as little time as possible, and everything to last as little time as possible. We want a 1-turn duel there, as we had. And that was as good as I could get. So that's why we chose Flick and Valeria. Because they weren't the 2 weakest options, and Valeria is certainly not the option with the shortest dialogue. But it was still worth sitting through Valeria's dialogue and the extra time Tio's army spent stabbing our army in order to have a 1-turn duel. Now Flick's got an idea. Hey, this is super annoying. The 2 characters you have to speak to change your party members are in the room, in the war room, and they won't let you change party members with them if you just speak to them in there. So you have to walk out, then walk back in again, so they will reset their positions. So you can change party members. And who did I just put in? Was it Cleo and... Definitely Stallion and Cleo. They're pretty much the 2 regulars throughout this. Cleo becomes basically my magic user. Stallion is for the fast world map speed and just the general running. I mean, Victor does have a holy rune. So he's always that he's in any situation where I can't have Stallion in my party, Victor always is in the party by default. I think that's already happened. Though the only time that is the case, I think, has already happened. And then obviously Victor leaves later on temporarily. Oh yeah, and Taiho obviously, because you need someone who knows boats for the speedboat, which is a just kind of just really see-through way of having Taiho be in your party because you run into people that Taiho knows. Anyway, yeah, so really my two core party members throughout this run are Cleo and Stallion. But in not too long a time from now, we're going to be done with all the fights we're going to do. So after that, Cleo's not even key. It's really just Stallion. Ignore Cage. Stood being all emo in the corner. It's Kanto. Good old Kanto. There we go. Again, these sections of the game that are all just cutscene, I don't have a great deal to say about. It's just, you know, just mash through the text as quickly as you can. Alright, now we're back fighting Tio. And again, I'm trying to fight this war fight in such a way that means that the RNG lands in a good place for the duel. So yeah, if it looks like I'm just selecting really random groups to charge at him, I mean, I kind of am, but like, yeah, and they have such long. I remember this being a real struggle actually, trying to find a way to end the duel, this war fight on an RNG value where Tio doesn't defend. Because I think we just get a two-turn... I think it's a two-turn duel. Yeah. Yeah, and he attacks us twice, which is annoying. And what would have been ideal is if he just desperate attacked twice, and we can defend twice, because that's quicker. But he just insisted on defending either the first or second turn, like no matter where I ended the war fight. And it was very annoying. So when I eventually landed on that, I was just like, yeah, okay, fine, that'll do. Apparently we're having a moment of silence for Tio. The Gremio didn't warrant. Oh, no, war music. Alright, attacking the Fortress of Lorimar. Again, like, I'm just saying what's happening in the game. But these bits of it that are just long story cutscene, like, it's just not a huge amount to say. Oh yes, Stallion and Humphrey. This bit is the bane of a lot of it, has ended quite a few of my live runs because I always forget to walk back in there and recruit Kirk. And then I get to the next big war fight, which I guess would probably be Griffith. And realize that that my army numbers aren't what they are, like 5 off what they should be, and then I forgot to get Kirk and then run over. But yeah, I've got Humphrey in the party, and that's because during this little bit of the story, this little Necklord arc, we're gonna get Champion's Rune. And I went through a few different... Yeah, we're going to put Champion's Rune. I decided on Cleo in the end. I went through a few different people. I put it on Humphrey initially, because the next sort of little quest we have to go on is the Dragon Knights, and we have to bring Humphrey with us for that. And we're going to have Champion's Rune by then, so we want to have a whole party that's nice and high level, so that Champion's Rune really comes into effect, so that we miss out the maximum number of encounters. So bringing Humphrey with us here means we have an opportunity to get him up a few levels before before Dragon Knight, whatever. So that's why we have Humphrey with us, and I initially had given him Champion's Rune and left Earth Rune on Cleo. But then why didn't I do that? Why didn't I stick with that? Because you can't bring Humphrey with you somewhere. Moravia. You can't bring Humphrey with you through Moravia. Or through Sonya's? Through Shasarazarazade? Maybe. You definitely can't bring Humphrey with you to Moravia, though, because he's off attacking the fortress of Rakan or whatever that you never actually see. And so if he has Champion's Rune, you're kind of boned because you really need Champion's Rune for Moravia. So I ended up giving it to Cleo because she was the only one who is with us through this bit. She's the only one who's with us at the time when it makes sense to do a rune swap, and who's with us throughout. Yeah, I remember this. I remember Kulon Cave being annoying. There are a couple of reasonable stretches without... Oh yeah, we voice of Earth these guys. It looks like you wouldn't be able to voice of Earth them because it only affects creatures that are on the ground. It doesn't affect flying creatures. But they are apparently on the ground, even though it looks like they're kind of smoky and floating. Yeah, I remember... I think this is the longest stretch. Little formation swap there. Why did we do that? Oh yeah, because we're going to Black Shadow these guys, and we need McDowell to not get hit by that little attack, because if he does get hit by that little known mechanic in this game, if you take a physical hit, it slows your speed. Only for that turn though. So if you want to have someone who with a lower speed act before a boss, for example, have a couple of other faster characters physically attack that boss, which will lower its speed down so that the slower character can get a spell off or whatever. It's kind of cool, but it works the other way around as well. So when those little orange fire elemental things spit their shit at McDowell, it slows him down, meaning that the Banshees act before he can get his black. Look at all these fucking fights, man. Like, they're just relentless. Like, there's so many, and it's such a long dungeon. And I just couldn't find a way of... And there's another one there just a few steps before the end. Makes me sick. But yeah, I just couldn't find a viable way of getting the game to a different chunk of RNG where it doesn't happen. I mean, I tried using Black Shadow on a different group, because Black Shadow advances by thousands, but it varies how much it advances it. So I tried using Black Shadow on a different group. I tried waiting around for a different spot. I tried a few things. That was as good as I could get it. And it wasn't very good. Still though. Yeah, I had to do that little formation swap so that the little red things didn't fire their shit at McDowell, because then the Banshees would, because then if McDowell takes that physical damage, slows him down, and the Banshees act before him, and their attack takes fucking ages. So I had to do a little formation swap to move McDowell out of the way of where those fire elementals attack. And now we've got a whole load of cutscene again. Delicious water. I wish we knew more about what Yuba's deal is. Is he in 2? Is he in Suikoden 2? It's so long since I've actually played that game. I can't remember. He's obviously in 3. His features in 3 the heaviest. But I'm sure he's in 2. Alright, that's that. Use one of Stallion's infinite escape talismans. Talismans? Talismen? Dunno. Then we haven't got a Rune Master of our own, so we have to teleport to Seika. Cheeky rune swap. Pretty sure all we did there was just remove Cleo's Earth Rune and give her Champion's Rune. Now, I think now that after Clon Cave there, we are not going to fight anything anymore. I'm pretty sure every encounter we get, including boss fights for the rest of the game, we just instantly get out of. And as far as Champion's Rune goes, we are the level we are. And unlike the live run, I do keep Champion's Rune throughout the rest of the game. Which just isn't really viable or useful at all in the live run. Not really. But I thought it was for the TAS. Then Hicks, come and fill up the 6th slot in my party. And this is another thing about Champion's Rune. It works on the sum of your party's levels, not on average. So whether or not you can run, or whether or not you have to run or can let go a fight, is based on the average level of your party. Whether or not you get a certain fight if you have a character with Champion's Rune is based on the sum of your party's levels. And so, if you have someone with Champion's Rune and you want to make the most of it, you should always have a full party of 6. Is my understanding of how Champion's Rune works anyway. Yeah, not an ideal run through Necklord's Castle. We get another one here before we go in. No, sweet. Not an ideal run, but I don't think it was bad. Pretty good, actually. And of course, Necklord just loves the fucking drama, so we have to just sit and listen. He seems pretty distracted right now, and I mean, Victor's got a sword that can fuck him up, so... A little bit cheap, but maybe just get him while he's playing the organ. No? Alright then, I guess, in that case we'll just have to throw money at you until you fall down. Right now, if I remember rightly, the run back out of Necklord's Castle is much better. I think we maybe... Is that the only fight we get? He asked, hopefully. Is there one more? Ah, yeah. Alright, well, 2 fights. Pretty good. Oh, shit. Alright, 3 fights. But yeah, we're not... Because we're not really, like, as high level as we sort of might... Like, in the live run, I do at least... Tengar's standing, like, in the banister of the steps. I never noticed that before. Yeah, in the live run, at least in the non-glitched 100% live run that I do, you actually do fight a few fights in Necklord's Castle to level up, and then you obviously fight Necklord himself, meaning that you're much higher level than we are right now in this TAS. As you go through Necklord's Castle, so I think Champion's Rune. Are you high enough level that it actually makes a difference? Don't know that you are, actually. Maybe you'd still get the fights we got. I don't know. Alright, now it's time for Dragon Knights. So Humphrey comes with us. We don't have anyone with Holy Rune. That's it, yeah. In my 108% run, I've given Humphrey Holy Rune earlier on. But I haven't given him anything here, so we just have Cleo, Stallion, and Lucan, who is important for story reasons. Again, like, I know I say it every time I go quiet, but, like, this is just... There's nothing special about what's happening right now. This is just the game, but quick. Little pause outside of Ante there. Why was that? Oh, yeah, that's as part of... I think I maybe also do a very slight pause on this screen here. So I needed to get the RNG value for the start of Dragon's Den to a very specific place to get an optimal run through Dragon's Den without any encounters. But I couldn't get it because of the way in Ante every frame was advancing by 4 places. And I couldn't get it to the exact... And so because it's advancing by 4 every frame, I couldn't get it to the exact point that I wanted by just using pauses in Ante. So I had to combine it with a little pause in Vicky Teleport Room as well. There we go, no encounters. I was super proud of my run through with no encounters until Yeah. So I remember these bits of the game. I remember, you know, doing these bits of the game, making these bits of the run. I remember them much clearer than I do the beginning because they were much more recent. But yeah, I couldn't. That massive gap in the RNG there was the only one of that size. The massive gap in the RNG, I mean, the long stretch without any fights through Dragon's Den, was the only gap of that size for ages. And there was no way I could find one that was big enough to not have that encounter right at the end of the cave there. Which is annoying, but you know. It's a short dungeon. One fight. I'm fine with it. Then, of course, we have Seek Valley. And you'll notice I do a little pause there. Again, that's just for all the reasons I've already explained, to advance the RNG to a point where don't get any encounters running through Seek Valley. There we go. Bribe. We pay this amorphous crystal blob to let us pass by peacefully. I'm sure it has many uses for currency. More story. More cutscene. It's nice to see it all flown through as quickly as possible, though. Oh yeah, now we've got the whole bit with Futch. And just like the flight to Magician's Island, this little animation overwrites the RNG value, sets it to, sets it at a certain value as well. A different value to the one the flight to Magician's Island does, but still. We can't really use it for anything, even in the live run. Because we hit another RNG reset basically straight afterwards. Alright. Dragon's done. Now I believe it's time for Moravia. Ugh, yeah, and we have to bring Kryn and Kasumi. Kasumi's not such a problem, but Kryn is like level 6 or something. Which is super annoying just for Champion's Rune, because it's a slot in the party taken up by a character who's level 6, which, and Champion's Rune depends on the sum of your party members' levels to be effective. So Kryn throws a bit of a spanner in that. I think I get a pretty good Moravia. I think I only get 2 encounters throughout. Good. Let's go. Now this fight, I can't quite remember how this fight goes actually. Oh yeah, we got these annoying, this dialogue at the beginning. You can't just mash through in the way you can normal dialogue. You have to wait for the words to all take their sweet time about revealing. Yeah, it's just long. I can't quite remember how the fight goes. I seem to remember it not being, like, ideal. for whatever reason. Yeah, we have to fucking bow them because they do magic first. And this is an example. Yeah, it's an RNG reset, and it always resets to the same value. So no matter what you do in the lead up to this fight, again, speaking for if you're playing on the BizHawk emulator anyway, for the hardware I'm playing on, no matter what I do in the lead up to that war fight, they will always use magic for their first turn. And I tried using magic in return, which sometimes your magic sort of wins. Maybe there's some way of making it so that your magic always goes and theirs doesn't, but I don't know what the deciding factor is there. Maybe I should have found out when I was making the TAS, but I didn't. But we don't really have to worry about where that fight spits us out in the RNG, because this menu is quite nice, actually. Yeah, it's awful for the live run. That menu is like one of the scariest parts of the live run, because RNG is advancing very rapidly while you're selecting your party there. Because you're on a screen, the 4th floor or whatever it is of your castle, and there's lots of NPCs on that screen that are, could effectively be moving around. So, well, they're off screen, but they're in that area. So RNG is advancing really, really fast while you're choosing that menu, and where you land in the RNG after that party selection menu determines what fights you're going to get in Moravia. So you have to time it very, very precisely during a live run. Precise timing is obviously not an issue for a TAS. So I could wait however many... I waited a few... Couldn't really tell it. It did happen very quickly, but I did wait a few frames on that party selection menu at a point in order to skip to sort of nudge myself into a spot in the RNG where I only get... I think I've now had the 2 fights that I will have through Moravia, and that's it. Rescue Victor and Warren. And in the live run, in the 100% live run, Moravia is doubly scary, because after this little cutscene, you've then got to run back through Moravia again to go and recruit Vincent and pick up the Mother Earth crystal that's in that chest. But obviously we're not doing that now. But yeah, that party selection menu can really fuck with your run. At this point, this deep in the run as well, it's killer. But obs are no worries for a TAS. Now, Sonya. I've mentioned throughout this that the war fights all reset, like they overwrite whatever RNG value the game is on to a certain value, and that's the value that the game plays out from that point onwards. Sonya doesn't quite play ball in that regard. The Sonya war fight resets to one of roughly 28 values. I think it's 28. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've actually done a live run. I think it might be 28. I'm not sure how many it's actually possible for it to reset to. But again, it's the value that the RNG value that the game resets to at that point, and at all RNG reset points, is determined by a timer in the hardware somewhere. I don't know the ins and outs of exactly what and how it works, but that's the extent of what I know about it. At the Sonya reset point, it seems that whatever digit in the timer, I don't know, whatever element of that timer is determining the RNG reset values is very variable. And so the Sonya reset is unreliable. You basically have to plan for 28 different scenarios, because one of 28 things is going to happen when you start the Sonya war fight. And in a live run, you just have to go into the fight. You use Dragon. She will always use Sonya's charge or Sonya's magic or something as her first attack. She'll never use bow as a first attack. So you can always use dragons to begin with. Boom. Get, is it a quarter of their army gone? Or a fifth or something? Get a chunk of their army gone. Then you charge. Yeah, that's it. She always uses magic first. So you use dragons, meaning that her magic is then used. So you are free to always charge, and based on what she does and then how many units are lost, you can work out which RNG value the game's been reset to, and then look for your strat for that reset value and work out where to go from there. For the TAS, I could basically choose which of those 28 values I wanted the game to reset to. I thought it was going to be a huge issue. I thought I was going to, every time the TAS played through, it was going to get to this point and reset to a different value, because it's not based on RNG, it's based on some hardware timer. But it turns out, and this is just a flaw in my understanding of TAS, it is always going to be the same if every input up to that point in the game has happened in the exact same millisecond. So you might have noticed, probably not though, that when choosing choosing the option for let's go ahead and attack Sonya's fortress, I paused for a few frames. That was to allow the hardware timer or whatever to tick over. Basically, I selected that option as soon as possible, and the value that then reset the fight to was not good. The battle didn't play out very well. So I then waited for a frame, and it reset. Had the TAS wait for a frame before selecting let's go ahead and attack Sonya's fortress. And then the game reset the value differently. And so I just basically experimented and found a place where this war fight was going to spit me out to a place in the RNG that was somewhere close to a nice juicy gap with no encounters in the fortress. So I found one of those that was pretty close, and then I tweaked the way that I fight this particular version of the war fight so that it puts me in a real good place in terms of what encounters I'm going to get throughout Shazazada Fortress. That. However the fuck you say that. Whose idea was it to call the fortress that? B, whose idea was it to use fire to burn this place down? This is a fortress. It's called the Floating Fortress. It's on a fucking river. We just select a bunch of high-level characters for Champions Rune. Count the random encounters, by the way. Look, I know we're running through it in order to shut the water off, to stop the water from actually flowing through it. But still, it's sat on a river or a lake or whatever, and it seems to be, it's clearly made entirely of stone. So what's the best way to destroy this fortress? Fire. Fucking anyway, did you count the random encounters leading up to the shell there? Are you at 0? Because you should be at 0. There we go. None. That took so long. Took so long to make the game land me in that place where there were no encounters for that many steps. It was like The whole fortress is 777 steps. In case anyone wanted to know. Minus the 60-step grace period at the beginning, because your step counter does reset as you walk into the fortress for whatever reason. So minus the 60-step grace period, I needed to find a gap in the RNG of 717. Which I eventually found and managed to tweak and nudge my way into through through getting the correct war fight. Oh, Sanchez, you've lit the fire on this fortress of stone and water. I'm sure it's going to be very effective. All right, we're getting there. We're getting real close to the finish line. Oh yeah, we have to go and do a little top up because I need to bribe all of the soldier fights that are in Gregminster, and you need at least to bribe all of them, plus the money for Ain Guide, plus the money for Barbarossa. You need something like 820,000. And I had 600,000, so I was more than 200,000 away from how much I needed. And I thought about, can I go back and reroute the run so that I spend 200 grand less, so that I don't have to go back and do another Jasper there. In the end, I decided I would rather kill myself. No, I couldn't. I don't think it's possible, because I think the amount of, just purely from the amount of boss bribes you have to do, I think you spend too much money to still have enough by this point to bribe all of Gregminster. So I think you will always have to go and do another Jasper there. Plus, while I'm there, I thought I might as well just make all of, just do it all triple wins, because it doesn't really take any extra time, maybe another frame or two, but then I've got a load of extra change if I need to bribe any random encounters throughout Gregminster Palace, which I think I do, actually. And the Yuba war fight actually is similar to Sonya in that it can reset to one of several values on the. I don't think that is true of the PSTV, but it's true of the BizHawk emulator. And in live runs, I've had it reset to one of 5 values, I think, but I couldn't get it. I could only get it to reset to 2 without waiting for ages and ages for the timer to tick over to whatever else it needed to tick over to. I don't know. No, 3. I got it to reset to 3 different values, and 2 of them meant that I had to use bow in the war fight at least twice. No, only twice. I think twice. No, that was it. No, one of them. So I could get this fight at 3 RNG values. This war battle at 3 RNG values. 1, Yuba's army used bow first turn and shot down the dragons. So I was like, I really would like to use dragons in the first turn, because they take down a percentage of the army, I think, and that's where they're most effective. So that one was out. The next value meant that I had to use bow twice. The battle played out in such a way that I had to use bow twice, which is not good. And then this one I only had to use bow once, and I couldn't get it to reset to any other values. So this is the one I went with. It isn't great in terms of the fights. The fights I get throughout Gregminster Palace. I think I get more than I would have liked, I think. But it definitely still saves time over how the war fights would have played out on the other values. Chief Hanzo, you're alive. Yes, but we had to keep it a secret. Oh. No more explanation required, thank you. Yeah, Stallion for the speed, and then Cleo and Kasim because they are, I think, the two highest level people I have. Are they? Is Cleo even that higher level at the minute? Because I don't need her for any magic. No, she has Champion's Rune, that's why. So yeah, bribe, aim guide, and then he spontaneously combusts. And now the bribe fest begins. The first one, 6 fights with 4 soldiers, 6 fights with 5 soldiers. Yeah, and I was really annoyed that I had to have a encounter there, and I get another one, I think. Yeah, there. Super annoying. But it doesn't really matter. Now we're pretty much home and dry. Jesus Christ. There we go, last one. And I think I do get a fight up here, which is annoying. Yeah. Oh well. That's it. No random encounters here. May look like I walked an extra step to the left, but no. The wall closes in a little bit at the top of the corridor. Is all that remains of my empire. Bribe. Yeah, get a bit of a lag spike there. I don't know if that happens all the time. Oh yeah. So at this bit, if you get all 108, if you recruit all the generals, if you recruit Milich as well, and fuck, there's another one. Not Tio. Tio always dies. Commander, Milich, Sonya. Then they all appear now, and they all have a little bit to say. But as it happens, Kasim happens to be in my party, so he's there. He emerges from my body, as, you know, party members do. And the only other one we recruit is Kwanda, so he just turns up by himself. It looks so weird. It's like Kasim was with me anyway. And then Kwanda's just like... I don't think he even says anything. I think he just walks in by himself and just goes, oh, we'll come and stand here. For whatever reason. Oh, he does say something. He says one thing. Boom. Right, now this shaky screen is advancing RNG every frame. Which is super annoying in a live run because you just can't control whether or not you're going to get a fight after you get out of this long corridor. And I thought, does that mean if I just stand still, hit there for long enough, eventually the RNG will run into a value where I will hit a battle, and can you get a battle from standing still? Turns out, no, you can't. You have to be walking and the RNG advancing to hit a value that contains a fight. For you to get a fight. Now you can't tell, but I stood still for 1 frame in that long walk there. And that was because I was going to get a fight running down and across that long corridor. But and you can't do this in a live run, obviously, but as the game ticked over to the RNG value that contained the fight I was going to get, I stood still for that 1 frame, and then because the screen's shaking, it just advanced past that value anyway, so then I carried on. So I stood still for 1 frame and avoided the fight. I was pretty pleased with that. Yay, victory music. Well, that's it. That's my TAS. The final input is going to happen in just a second. Yeah, as I said, there's a version without commentary. Not that if you've watched this through up to this point, I can't imagine you want to watch it again. But yeah, I'm always happy to chat about this game or the series. I'm, you know, something of a fan, as you can probably tell. So if any questions, or if you want to speedrun the game and you want advice on speedrunning the game, let me know. Definitely check out 01337. He's like the master of this game. Oh, we had it. Was I talking? Yeah, we've had it. Yeah, and the sound's going to go a bit funny now. So it's over. All inputs are over. It was the last speech bubble that Lucan said. Yeah. That's it. I quite enjoyed the process of making it. It's just gonna yeah, it's kind of a shame that we won't be able to know how sometimes with TAS you can like map the inputs onto a controller and have it played out on actual hardware. Won't ever be able to do that with this because, as I mentioned a few times throughout the run, it's the hardware itself that determines how the RNG behaves a lot of the time. So even if we were to map these exact inputs onto a PS1 controller, PS2 controller, PS TV, whatever, and have it play this game, it wouldn't work. It would get desynced very quickly, which is a shame. So it will only ever live in video form and on BizHawk. But I think the from like console on to no, so I think from console on to final input, I think it's 2 hours 32 and like 58 seconds or something. From the name selection confirm, which is where we start the timer for live runs. I think it's 2 hours 32 and 30 seconds. oh fuck, I don't know. So it's something like that. But it's 2.5 hours basically, roughly 10 minutes quicker than the live record for this category, which is not as quicker than I had sort of thought / hoped it might be. But never mind. It was still a fun way to spend a few weeks of my life. That's it. I'm going to end the video now. Any questions, thoughts, suggestions, ideas? Please do leave them in the comments. I have other videos on this channel as well. Just, you know, just throwing that out there. Do what you do with it, whatever you want. Yeah, thanks for watching.